Hi, I'm Tim Robinson, Editor-in-Chief of AEROSPACE, and with me is Deputy Editor Steve Bridgewater.
Hi guys.
And Features Editor Bella Richards.
Hi everyone.
Welcome to AEROSPACE NOTAM, another edition of our podcast and videocast, looking at global aviation, aerospace and space news, and what we have upcoming in the next issue of AEROSPACE, September 2024. In the magazine, we cover everything from GA to spaceflight, from airliners to airports, from air law to eVTOLs. So as you can see, we've got a nice new set here. This is in the new Airbus Business Centre.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And we have
It's plush, isn't it?
But it's plush, very plush.
Fancy.
We have an elite, video crew now helping us out. So we're looking forward to your comments on this particular episode.
We've got new microphones,
Yeah.
we've got
Hopefully
video
this sounds
equipment.
better.
Hopefully this is effectively a relaunch of the podcast.
Relaunch of the podcast. So where have we been in the past month? You've been on holiday. I've been busy.
I've been hobbling around on my Farnborough
Yeah.
Wall. I did manage to get to Old Warden to the air show down there, which was good fun. Bit of a de Havilland theme with the vampire flying with the DH-88 Comet. That was very nice. But no, quiet month.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, same for me.
But it's still been a busy month for aerospace news as always. So who wants to kick off? Shall I go there?
Yeah, why not?
So obviously the big news as we're recording this is F-16s now in Ukrainian skies since February 2022, the invasion. That's what they've been asking for. First batch have been delivered. We think there's about sort of 6, and they've already been in action intercepting drones, missiles coming in. Unfortunately, one has actually been lost. One of the pilots there earlier this week, and one of the pilots actually was instrumental in pressing and lobbying for these fighters in the US. But having said that, as we've said before on the reported before on the podcast in the magazine, they've got plenty of them. You know, there's plenty of F-16s around the world, plenty of spares there, and it's starting to build up the Ukrainian Air Force to the kind of medium-term rebuilding and making up for all the attrition losses. So.
And Zelensky also calling for retired NATO F-16 pilots that want to volunteer their services as well.
Yeah, so that could be shades of the American volunteer group, Flying Tigers. There, there's already international volunteers in Ukraine assisting there in the defence. So are there some Viper pilots there who want to go and fly and help defend the country?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What about you?
Yeah.
What have you caught your eye? Space.
Obviously. Just before I think we went to press for our last magazine edition, Germany's kind of upcoming rocket company, rocket factory Osberg, I feel like I say that wrong, was very close to launching. I think in the coming months, I think it was going to be September. That's what they said at Farnborough. But unfortunately, during a kind of routine hot fire test of the engine that was supposed to last for about 35 seconds on the 19th of August, it resulted in pretty big an anomaly. And yeah, a complete loss of the first stage.
And this was in northern Scotland, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was in at Saxavord. Oh yeah, no wait, it was going to launch from there, but so RFA-1, which was the rocket, basically is at least the stage is a complete write-off now. And at the time when we went to press, there was not much information known, just that there was a complete fire. I think the BBC released a footage. Yeah. It was huge
spectacular,
fire.
wasn't it?
Yeah. There's kind of good and bad things come from it. So the company on the 23rd of August provided an update, basically being really transparent and saying what they had found in kind of their preliminary investigation. So to give a snapshot, so they ignited 8 of the 9 helix motors, and this was the first time they'd done all of them together. But the 9th, developed a fire in the oxygen pump, and it ended up becoming really hard to contain, obviously. And then because it was being fed by like kerosene, it ended up becoming, I believe, a oxygen fire. And then clearly the stage was engulfed in flames.
Ran away.
And apparently because the fire was so big, the typical emergency procedure wasn't big enough to be able to fix the issue. And then yeah, so that was kind of what happened. Unfortunately, they were saying, you know, we've tested these engines over 100 times, and it's the first time it's happened. Which really does suck because they were so close to launching, and we're going to finally see a launch from the UK.
What do we think has done to the timeline?
I mean, we were talking about this before. I wonder if it definitely won't be this year. No way. I mean, they haven't said. Obviously, that's my opinion, but you know, I doubt they'll be doing it this year. They did announce though that the first launch attempt will be done with the second first stage that they were building, which is currently in development right now. So they'll just use that for the first launch. But I don't know, they didn't say where they're up to in building it. But they said the good news is that, and which you probably would have seen if you watched the video, when the stage kind of fell after the fire engulfed it, it fell into the right direction that like it should if there was any anomaly that was going to happen. So the umbilical tower and the launch pad was completely unaffected.
Okay.
So that's
which
good,
is really good news. And I think apparently their second rocket, so the first stage, but the second version that they're building now has over 100 improvements that should be able to kind of contain a massive engine malfunction like this. But I was going to say one kind of good news from this that I've noticed is, you know, when they published this kind of update, a lot of people were commenting saying thank you for the transparency. And this is something we've seen with other companies who have failures, and it's inevitable. Again, it's launch, it happens, especially the first time. But people want transparency. They want to hear all the details as much as they can give, and I think it really shows that RFA is going in the right direction with showing that we're getting out there. Even if we're failing early, here's, you know, what we're learning.
Here's the progress,
Yeah, anyway, sorry that was a bit long, but what about you, Steve?
I've got a story which is kind of GA, but a little bit on the large side of GA. We were at Singapore earlier this year, and we saw a company called Mallard Enterprises there, who were one of the companies trying to get onto the bandwagon, if you like, with amphibious aircraft. We've had various things in the magazine over the last year about the rise of amphibious aircraft for all sorts of uses. Mallard were at Farnborough again, still don't have a physical prototype, but we've got some great artwork which we've used for our blueprint in the magazine this month. And it's their ME1, the Mallard ME1, which is a 19-seater. And they actually have quite a few interesting orders that have come through at Farnborough. So, interesting. A number of Indian airlines, Indian operators looking to fly this aircraft, and also a Turkish operator looking at regional air connectivity. But the thing that I really liked with this, it's a multi-purpose aeroplane. The Mallard. Everything from search and rescue to sort of pseudo-military operations. They're also pitching this as a flying recreational vehicle. So it's got it's a twin boom aircraft. It's got a big ramp on the back, and they've pitched the idea that inside on that, with that ramp, you can have your jet skis, you can have your fishing gear. It's a real sort of an outward bound aircraft, and I think it's quite a cool looking machine as well.
Yeah, it looks cool. It's actually very sleek.
It's a great looking machine. Yeah, you're right. And they've had so far 60 LOIs for this. So hopefully, and it's like quite a lot of those from the Indian subcontinent.
So it looks like a 21st century update of the Grumman Duck, Grumman Widgeon, or possibly Disney's DuckTales with Baloo the bear as pilot. I could see a reboot coming on there.
Very possibly. It's a Grumman Albatross, Grumman Mallard, but with twin booms.
Yeah.
So really, really funky looking thing. So that's my first one. Tim, anything else from you?
Well, we've got so safety has been in the news again this past month as well. Unfortunately, there was an ATR crash in Brazil, so 62 people dead in that incident. There was pretty shocking video clips being shared of what appeared to be the aircraft in a flat spin going down into a residential area. Luckily, nobody on the ground. Nobody on the ground killed. Obviously, it's still an ongoing accident investigation. We can't really kind of comment on it. Best to wait till the accident report comes out. But there was icing reported in the area, that particular area. And I think one thing it's important to stress as well is that there's now a lot of kind of news reports going on where people being scared of flying. And people worried about Boeing. People were worried about turbulence, and there was something actually that popped up just recently. I think it was yesterday, 2023 was the safest ever year for commercial aviation.
Yeah.
No major hull losses.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah, I think we reported this in...
We did,
Yeah.
because 2024 got off to a bad start. There was the runway collision in Tokyo.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just worth keeping everything in context, isn't it?
So yeah, I mean that's the biggest story there, and obviously it's going to be an accident investigation. We'll get to the bottom of it and come out with some answers. Yeah. What about you? Well, talking of what else have you got on?
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone's seen the news, but I had to bring it up. Starliner. Yet again. No, so I believe as we went to press, NASA officials were kind of mulling over whether the astronauts would be returned on Starliner or the Crew Dragon, and as most of you would know, they decided, I think last week or something, that Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore will be returning February 2025 with the Crew 9.
On a different airline.
Crew,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they've transferred, haven't they?
Yes, they have been.
Bus replacement service.
Yeah. Yeah, so this will basically turn an 8-day mission into an 8-month mission, which is crazy. I think personally, and I think this is what I'm gathering from most people, I think they definitely made the right decision in terms of, safety first, and if safety really is first, they just have to get over the fact
if there's any doubt, there's no doubt.
Exactly, yeah. And so yeah, I think Bill Nelson, NASA's administrator, and Pam Melroy, they attended a flight readiness review last week in Houston, and during that time, a bunch of the agency's senior officials got together and they took a poll vote to decide, and apparently it was unanimous for Wilmore and Williams to return on the Crew Dragon. So it bodes well for SpaceX, but unfortunately not for Boeing. So yeah, I think Starliner is going to be undocking autonomously on 6th of September. I think that's kind of the rumored date. I don't know if that's been confirmed, at least today. I don't think it has been. And it'll land, and then no earlier, finally Crew 9 will launch to the ISS in late September, and then there'll be 2 extra seats for the Starliner astronauts to return with them in February. Of course, the public's response has been what we expect. On one hand, it's good that Boeing and NASA decided on the most safe option, but as we all know, this does not bode well for Boeing's Starliner program at all. But you know what? Sorry, just quickly, what I thought was interesting is the NASA administrator, Bill Nelson, there was a question at a press conference asking, did the Columbia and Challenger disasters impact your decision? And I thought it was actually great. He said, yes, definitely, that they, what did he say? I've got a quote. They're trying to turn around the culture that first led to the loss of Challenger and then led to the loss of Columbia, where obvious mistakes were not being brought forth. And he said later, NASA ever since has tried very hard to bring an atmosphere in which people are encouraged to step forward and speak their mind. And he said, I think today is a good example of that, showing that, despite it having, like, I guess, a terrible PR look for Boeing, ultimately, we don't want,
it's the right thing.
It is the right decision. So, yeah.
So, I mean, the other thing that strikes me from that as well, and you've written about this as well, is space rescues. That's more and more people are going into space, more and more private companies going to space. So space rescues is now, and it also validates the decision by NASA to have competing companies.
Absolutely.
Where else would you have 2 human-rated spacecraft able to rescue the crew from another?
It absolutely validates that.
And you've got a third one awaiting the wings. You've got Dream
Chaser,
Dream Chaser, not quite ready yet, but
promising, very promising.
So having that extra built-in redundancy for not just NASA, but for internationally, the more orbital vehicles you've got, the more human-rated spacecraft you've got to get people down from orbit, the better.
Exactly.
So is there a need here for compatibility across? Because obviously they've had to take SpaceX compatible spacesuits up on Dragon to bring the Starliner crew back, isn't there? Is there a call here for more compatibility between?
I mean, even in terms of docking, I think I wrote this in my space rescue article about how there needs to be like an internationally recognized docking system so that, example, different spacecraft can dock to the ISS or future commercial
Did
stations.
we learn nothing from Android and Apple phones and and swapping chargers
Yeah,
around?
no, it is true. It's a micro example
Yeah.
of that, but there needs to be, and apparently I think there's kind of issues with, even though they're all somewhat similar, there's, that's a longer story for another day. But
Right.
yeah, but anyways, it's true.
Okay. Steve, what have you got?
Short one for me. Volocopter flew in Paris.
Okay.
Well, not quite as simple. We know that Volocopter, eVTOL company, they'd had great plans to fly at the Paris Olympics. Had a number of hurdles along the way, not least the Parisian mayor, I think, who declared the thing nonsense.
Yeah.
They did manage to fly. They didn't fly the passenger shuttles that they'd hoped for, but they did do a couple of demonstrations just on the last couple of days of the 2024 Olympics in August, and they flew from the Palace of Versailles. Which I think is quite interesting itself, because that's, of course, where a lot of the very early ballooning took place from as well. So, aviation history coming full circle. So,
it's a shame that they didn't get that, because I think I know, maybe even not passenger flights, as they were talking about commercial one, but having something, having a volocopter actually come into an Olympic stadium and land there to open it. I mean, you think about the jetpack at the LA Olympics.
Yeah.
So I mean, but we did have Tom Cruise sort of
well, that's
kind
true.
of abseiling.
I guess the next opportunity for a big, high-profile eVTOL appearance is probably going to be the Osaka Expo in Tokyo next year.
Possibly, yeah.
I know they're looking at having vertiports around the Expo Centre in Osaka, so that'll be one to watch for next year.
Yeah. Or the Paris Air Show, and coming up.
Yeah. I'm thinking of outside the aerospace
Yeah.
industry, but to a wider audience, I think Osaka could be that one. But, Tim, I think anything more?
Yeah, well, I've got a story there that coming out of Riyadh, but it's going to be happening in October. Is the RF is going to be testing augmented reality on its Hawk trainers. So they're going to be doing some demo flights with a cool tech there from a company called Red 6. They're based out in California. And basically, it's augmented reality goggles that turns flight training into an outdoor video game, if you like.
That's very interesting.
And it inserts 3D aircraft entities, missiles, tankers into the sort of an external environment while you're in the jet. So basically what that means you can do is you can go out there and you can fly formation against virtual entities. You can dogfight against virtual bunkers. It could be anything. You can be fighting against Russian MiGs, Chinese J-20s, you name it. You can fly formation with tankers. You can even do carrier landings with virtual carrier landings. And it's even got sort of missiles that come up and you have to kind of dodge. So it's kind of like the holy grail of flight training, in that there are synthetic systems now that will put virtual enemies in.
Yeah.
But they only appear on your radar page or your radar display or your electronic warfare. Yeah. And once you get to the within visual range stuff, which is the really toughest bit to train, then it all kind of falls apart. So there's great opportunities there in saving money, in increasing the fidelity of the training, in teaching people stuff that is too dangerous if you have two jets to go at it. Real physical jets in the sky. So that's going to be interesting. They're going to sort of test it out in a Hawk and be flying from Valley in the T2 and see where this tech leads.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So and we've got
one more from me.
More from me for the GA world.
Well, it's kind of GA and it's kind of Warbird as well. So it's got me written all over, really, isn't it?
And avgas.
I've written various things over the last couple of years on unleaded avgas. So we have been running unleaded fuel in our cars now for 20, 25 years. Why aren't we running unleaded fuel in light aircraft? And this is something which is starting to gain momentum, particularly in California. There are some airfields now which are banning the use of leaded fuel. There have been some issues with the fuel itself, or perceived issues. There are 3 manufacturers at the moment producing this fuel. Some of the flying schools have started to run big fleets on unleaded fuel. They've found some engine problems. Not obvious at the moment whether it's connected to the fuel or the way they're running the aeroplanes. But the interesting development now is the commemorative Air Force have flown a A-26 Invader, so 1944 twin-engine bomber, big radial engines, 2,000 horsepower, double WASP engines. They're running on one of those engines on unleaded fuel. So just proves that, this is not something which is limited to small aeroplanes and the 90, 100, 150 horsepower GA world, up to 2,000 horsepower. And I know Rolls-Royce have also said they're looking at this for the Merlin engine in the Mustang that they fly, and also the Griffin engine in the Spitfire. So it's often been said, what's going to happen with vintage aircraft? What's going to happen? One day we will run out of kerosene, aviation fuel, oil. Well, this is a potential solution in the short term, because when the rest of the world is not using leaded fuel in the smaller aeroplanes, there's not going to be that much need for it for the warbird scene, so it's going to either be very, very expensive or just not available.
Right.
Right. Okay. So on that roundup of some of the top news stories from the past month, we're now going to go over to our next bit, which is a specialist group insight. So join us after the break.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of the Royal Aeronautical Society's Specialist Group Insight segment. I'm joined today by Dr. Sanju Advani, who will be discussing a type of pilot training known as upset prevention and recovery training, or UPRT. Dr. Advani is a fellow of the Society, a licensed pilot, aerospace engineer, an influential figure in aviation safety, particularly in upset prevention and recovery training. He's the CEO of International Development of Technology, a company he founded in 2005, where his work focuses on enhancing aviation safety through advanced simulation technologies and training programs for pilots. Dr. Advani has played a key role in developing global standards for UPRT. In 2009, through the Society, he established the International Committee for Aviation Training in Extended Envelopes, which was instrumental in shaping the UPRT guidelines now used worldwide. These guidelines are included, for example, in the International Civil Aviation Organization UPRT requirements and the European Union Aviation Safety Agency UPRT regulations. He's the 2022 recipient of the AIAA Admiral de Flores Award for Flight Simulation. His company, IDT, is a member of Star Consulting Services, a subsidiary of the aviation underwriter Star Insurance. His work continues to influence how airlines and regulatory bodies implement training programs to address loss of control in flight events, a major safety concern, as we know, in aviation around the world today. Dr. Advani is joining me today from Italy. Thank you very much for your time today.
Wonderful to be with you, Seth. Very nice. Thank you as well.
It's an absolute pleasure. I suppose to kick things off, can you explain what upset prevention and recovery training actually is and why it's critical in modern aviation today?
Well, upset prevention and recovery training is exactly what it is. It's a training to prevent upsets, and if they're not prevented, to be able to recover from them. And you have to understand what it takes to make this successful. But let's go back and talk about what caused this and what led to this specific training. In the 1990s, we saw a rising trend in certain types of accidents. Many of them were solved by technology. The CFIT, for example, we solved that with EGPWS. Mid-air collisions solved with TCAS. Systems also improved in aviation, as we know. And so as a result of all the technology developments, aviation became very safe. And it is already very, very safe. And we know that today. Look at the statistics. However, there was one area, loss of control, that kept crawling upwards. The number and the statistics of those accidents continued to at least remain steady, if not increase. Relatively, it was seen as something growing out of all of the other statistics. So what did we do? We created guidelines such as the Airplane Upset Recovery Training Aid. We started doing unusual attitude training, putting a pilot in a simulator in an unusual attitude and asking them to recover. It actually missed a few important things. It was more focused on the physical part, but not the psychological part, because this is a psychophysical reaction that we need to train. We didn't focus so much on the CRM and all the competencies related to prevention. And that's why through the Royal Aeronautical Society, I chaired a working group called ICADI, the International Committee for Aviation Training in Extended Envelopes, which came up with these concepts of upset prevention and recovery training starting in 2009. So, moving forward now, we see that it's also very closely tied to a new area of concern, that is manual flying skills and manual flight operations.
Hmm.
And I think we're going to have to focus more and more on that as well.
Yeah, I quite agree. To tell me something, to do this type of training, do the majority of airliner simulators in use today replicate the flying characteristics of an aircraft accurately enough for this type of training? Or do you feel that more improvements may be needed for more effective training?
Well, you know, simulators are amazing. Being a simulator specialist myself, I see them as excellent training tools. And we always welcome improvements to simulator technology.
Yeah.
However, good UPRT is not dependent on the simulator. It's dependent on the quality of the instruction and hence the quality of the instructor. You know, you can have very good UPRT if you have a good instructor. And
Mm.
unfortunately, some of these upgrades to simulator become the focus and the only focus of a training program in UPRT. You know, a fantastic simulator and a poor instructor will give you poor results, but a good simulator with an excellent instructor will give you excellent results. That's the thing that we have to realize. And a common mistake is to focus more on the quality of the simulator than the quality of the instruction. And every simulator, even these ones with all the modifications and these fantastic aerodynamic improvements, they have their capabilities and their limitations. And it's the job of the instructor to understand both of those. What is it capable of, and what are the limitations? Just like every training medium that we use, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating, and again, I agree wholeheartedly. Tell me something. What are the common types of upsets that pilots are trained to recover from? Could you, for example, walk us through a typical UPRT session?
Yeah, typically in a UPRT session, you'll end up training stalls because stalls are the number one issue. Because
Mm.
stall being an exceedance of the critical angle of attack has to do with most upsets. But you'll also see nose high, nose low, overbank, overspeed. However, that should actually just be the final phase of a proper UPRT program.
Mm.
You first need to focus on the behavior of the airplane. That airplane is talking to me. I have to understand its language. It's telling me things that I really need to connect with. You know, if you think about it, what is loss of control? You could call it a stall. It is a loss of control event, but it's actually the loss of connection between the pilot and the airplane.
Mm.
That is the loss of control. So, how do we fix that? It starts with awareness. Listen to the airplane, speak that language.
Mm.
All upsets relate to angle of attack, energy, trim. And pilots, they often don't know how to relate this information as it's being presented to them in that modern aircraft, in the primary flight display. And
Mm.
so, if we first focus on that, then the recovery training is actually easy. It's a piece of cake. So, really, what this is, what we're now calling for, is not simply upset recovery training as it has been going over the past years, but what I would like to call UPRT 2.0, an advanced back to basics program where we really develop that strong mental connection between the pilot and the airplane. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And speaking as a pilot myself, it sounds like muscle memory, for example, would be an important component of UPRT. Are there strategies used to reinforce this during the training so that it becomes a natural response from a pilot?
Yeah, you know, if you think of muscle memory, that implies something. It implies that the muscles are memorizing something and doing something.
Hmm.
But it also suggests that we're not actually thinking. What we now want is that pilots are able to think and connect as soon as possible and remain connected.
Mm.
And so they must be able to maneuver that airplane cautiously given those conditions. You know, we make airplanes as efficient as possible. But these modern commercial airliners are also fragile. So you cannot just simply move the controls, whether it's a side stick or a column. It doesn't matter. You cannot maneuver these airplanes recklessly. You have to be careful. The other
Yeah.
thing, Seth, is that many of these actions are counterintuitive.
Mm.
So for example, if you think about a stall, it's not just a stall of the aerodynamics. There's another thing that I've coined more than a decade ago, and that's called brain stall. The skills increase with the workload, but at a certain point when we're overloaded, our mental capacity also stalls.
Oh, yeah.
In an upset, we may actually have brain stall as well. And now it's counterintuitive. So, what is our intuition telling us? Tighten the muscles. In other words, what I'm showing you, pull. That's not the right thing to do. We need to
Yeah.
gently and carefully unload. This takes practice. This is not simply muscle memory. This requires proper instruction, standardization of the instructors so that they know how to teach this, and all the instructors teach it in the same way. So, really, what we're talking about is much more than muscle memory. It's structured, professional manners of training, and it should be specific to the type of the airplane that we're training. And of course, we have to work with the OEMs and their standards and their requirements as well. So, you can see it's not just a simple training program that you just do once, done, finished, and move on. It
Yeah, it's
has to
absolutely
be
fascinating. Yeah, it sounds like it covers a lot of the psychological challenges that pilots face as well in these
yeah,
situations. Amazing.
exactly. And real upsets are frightening. They're
Yeah.
very unexpected, they're very rare, and they will lead to startle. So we get that discussion. Oh, let's create startle in the simulators. Yeah, you might be able to do that once, but
Yeah.
not in the long term. So let's
Yeah.
now try and teach startle management. Let's understand what is causing that startle. It's unfamiliarity with that situation. It's
Yeah.
not understanding how the airplane really is communicating with you. And if we can work on that, then we can help to overcome that startle and the psychological challenges as well. So, again, awareness, prevention, building confidence, and showing to the pilot this is what could happen.
Yeah.
But
That's
when they get an upset, they say, I know this, and I
yeah.
know how to solve this problem through the priorities I've been taught.
No, it's amazing. We've been talking for about 10 minutes or so now, and I've learned a lot just in that 10 minutes. But tell me something, are there common misconceptions out there about, or even any apprehension towards UPRT among the pilot community, or have you found that it's generally well received by regulators, airlines, OEMs, and so on?
I can tell you from my experience that there's one thing very common with the UPRT session when it ends: a big smile. Because the pilots come out of there thinking, wow, this is something really special. And the only frustration that I see when pilots, especially instructors, come out of our sessions is, why did nobody ever teach me this before?
Wow.
I should have known this. I've been flying for 23 years. I've received handwritten notes from senior instructors saying, how is it possible? You're not even type rated on this airplane, and you're teaching me things that I never knew. Well, it's back to basics.
Yeah.
You're developing a bond between the pilot and the airplane. And
Yeah.
that bond might be something that has been lacking throughout all of those years. Is it the pilot's fault? No. Is it the instructor's fault? No.
No. Yeah.
The thing that frustrates me about this is when an event occurs, very often the world says, pilot error. Very
Mm.
easy. Let's blame the pilots. Maybe they don't even exist anymore. I think it has been more of a pilot training error. It's an error, it's a fault in the system of training. And, we look at compliance, but it has to go beyond compliance. And that's why it's not just about ticking the box. You know, going back to your questions, there are many misconceptions.
Yeah.
Regulations are sometimes very complex. They're often misinterpreted. And
Yes.
this comes down to really practical knowledge. How do you impart that practical knowledge in an instructor who can pass it on to a trainee? So it's hard to develop this internally for airlines, and that's been one of the challenges for them. And I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, we've spoken so far about a lot of the benefits of UPR training, but are you finding any risks associated with the training itself? Any downside so far?
Well, I think the benefits outweigh the risk if
Mm,
the UPRT is done properly. The biggest risk, however, is an improperly trained instructor. We've known
mm,
that for a long time, and sometimes the solution that has been taken by the industry is let's take the instructor a little bit out of the equation.
yeah.
Let's simply give them tools that they can push a button and then they get a consistent input to the simulator. Let's teach them how to interpret the information on that beautiful instructor station.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
I totally agree with it. However, that is not everything. We must improve the knowledge of instructors. They should be able to observe the trainees rather than technology. Remember, UPRT, upset prevention, recovery, training, not technology. Let's focus on the training and let's make instructors better prepared to understand what the pilot is doing. And so, for
Mm,
example, instead of focusing on the tools, focus on the quality of the response of the pilot. Yes, it takes more training. It takes more effort to train those instructors to do that, but it can be done.
So it sounds to me like compliance with regulations and recommendations would be sort of a launch point, a baseline for a good UPRT program. But would you agree that it really is just the starting point, that over time a program like that would be enhanced and would grow into something that would be maybe airline specific for their type of operation or something along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about compliance, it's the minimum standard that we should always strive for.
Mm,
But as an industry, don't you agree? We should always be striving for better. We should make this a goal, not just for UPRT or training, but throughout the whole aviation industry. And the reality is, UPRT is new.
mm.
We simply don't know what we don't know. I mean, what a common statement for humanity, right?
Yeah,
But many authorities also need and still need the time to understand the complexities of a program like UPRT,
hmm
right?
hmm
And some of them have opted for, like I just mentioned, a purely simulator driven approach. Upgrade
mm
the simulator before even starting UPRT. Well, I can't think of anything more wrong than that because what you really need to do is start it as quickly as possible and as correctly as possible.
Yeah.
Problem is
Just
that
get started.
exactly. And
Yeah.
compliance, unfortunately, can lead to roadblocks like
Uh,
delays and slower introduction or incorrect introduction. And that's a
yeah.
big threat. And so some of these minimum programs that place more emphasis on only the FSTD alone and not the actual instruction and the quality of the instructors, that's where I see compliance could come a little bit further. We need to also educate not only the pilots, the
Mm.
instructors, but also the airline, as well as the authorities, and standardize the authorities as well around the world. And that's what we're working hard on.
Excellent, excellent. Wow, what a great program. Tell me something. ICAO introduced UPRT in 2014, and around a third of the world hasn't even started yet. Well, another major portion has provided only compliance-based UPRT training. Why is UPRT not being trained all over the world, and what can aviation authorities or operators do to get help with UPRT if they feel they need it?
Yeah, you see, if you look at it around the world, I would say only around one third of the world has really properly implemented UPRT. Now you wonder why, right? Of course, we had delays. We have a lot of other priorities in aviation. However, this is a very high priority safety issue.
Hmm.
Now, as you also just mentioned, a lot of it has been purely based on compliance, waiting for simulator upgrades, and then saying it's purely based on the simulator. No, we should be focusing more on the instructor training. And like I said, we don't know what we don't know. So
Yeah.
it takes time to develop a really proper, comprehensive program in UPRT. And I think that's been one of the reasons for the delays. And when I look around the world, there are several regions that have just recently introduced their UPRT requirements, their
Mm.
guidance. Another thing that the authorities need is proper training of their inspectors. Like, how
Mm.
do you inspect a program like this? How do you assure the quality that it's really taking place in the right way? And
Yeah.
not just checking a box, because checking boxes is fine, but that's not going to solve the underlying problem here.
Yeah.
We have to impart this knowledge, these skills to the pilots, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's not reaching the end user, then it's completely useless.
Right.
Are there any real life incidents that we know of anywhere where UPRT has directly contributed to a successful recovery? Anything in recent history that you're aware of?
Yeah, the reality is the recoveries that we do see, they don't really show up in statistics.
Yeah.
However, I have seen some correlation between the accidents that we've witnessed and regions or nations where UPRT has not yet been fully or properly introduced, or at the time of that event. If
Mm.
you take, for example, Srivijaya 182, that's an accident that occurred in 2021. It could have easily been avoided had the airline and the regulator at that time had proper high quality UPRT, as they do now, however.
Mm.
Now, I do know of one example when I received a call from the chief pilot of an airline saying that our pilot actually did recover properly from an upset at the very early stage,
Wow.
avoiding the upset that ensued after an unreliable high altitude, unreliable airspeed event, and actually applied the techniques that he was taught properly.
Oh,
That's good to
amazing.
hear. Now,
That
we
is, yeah.
want to hear more of those. I welcome people to give us feedback if they know of more. That's the kind of thing we want to see. And that's also the reason why we have engaged with the insurers around the world, because the insurance industry is
Mm.
also clearly very interested in risk management and risk mitigation.
Of
And
course.
combining that with this kind of work is, I think, also very important. They're an important element in this whole equation as well.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Again, and how do you see UPRT evolving in the next, let's say, 10 to 20 years, especially with the rise of new automations and perhaps autonomous systems in aviation as we sort of wade into a new era of global aviation? What do you see coming at us?
Well, whether it's good or bad, we're only in the starting blocks of
Mm.
UPRT. As I said earlier, only about one third of the world has really thoroughly, properly implemented UPRT in a very comprehensive, competency based manner.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, it's often purely compliance based, and we need to go better. We need to do better. I mean, the thing that we really need to focus on, as I said earlier, is that profound connection between the pilot and the airplane. That connection between what the airplane is telling us and how the pilot reacts, so as to prevent upsets. And I think in a pilot's job description, that's the number one item. You're
Yeah.
in control of that airplane. That's your job. That's why you are a pilot,
Yeah.
right? And so we should be focusing on that. And hopefully soon it will be 100% of the world doing this properly with what I have called UPRT 2.0, that more deep, profound connection between the pilot and the airplane. And so
Yeah.
we continue as an organization to work with ICAO, the OEMs, the NAAs, and as I said, insurance providers and airlines.
Mm.
It's everyone's interest to reach 100%. And coming back to the second part of your question, as automation increases, we're going to need to have more focus on the training of manual flying skills and better
Mm.
instruction. In fact, there's now a push for UPRT even in unmanned systems. That'll be a new ballgame altogether. And still, it'll come down to teaching the proper skills to the pilot or even the artificial pilot, whatever it may be.
That's fascinating. So UPRT training, even in a fully autonomous world, will still be a piece of our important training puzzle. And we've talked a lot about regulators and airlines and ICAO and so on and so forth. But what advice would you give to a pilot or an instructor, let's say, who are just beginning, who've never experienced a UPRT before, and they're walking into the simulator either as an instructor or a pilot? If you could speak directly to them, what would you say?
Well, you know, the instructors report to the airlines. So let's first start with the airlines. And the airlines also work, of course, with their authorities. And I would say to them, invest in the quality of the instruction, invest in proper inspector training, instructor training, and a long term implementation. Because as I see the newest regulations that are being developed right now, they're actually encouraging not just doing UPRT as a one shot deal, but a graduated implementation over a longer term, a more back to basics approach to the whole thing. Then going to the instructors, don't underestimate the challenges and the importance of good UPRT. It really is important to get it right. It's much different, it's very different from the other types of training that we normally do in airlines, which focus more on procedures, on systems, and of course, compliancy. And so remember, as airlines and instructors, good UPRT is not easy UPRT. Simply teaching instructors to push buttons on simulators and look at the iOS is not enough. We need to improve their knowledge. And my advice to pilots, enjoy the training because it really is enjoyable. It's a lot of fun and you'll be able to understand your airplane better. And in that rare event of that upset, you will have the tools to save yourself.
Absolutely fantastic. Dr. Advani, thank you very much again for your time today. Thank you for everything you do for the Society and in particular for the Flight Operations Group. You're a valued member of our team. Thank you very much.
With pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome back. So that was a great discussion on upset recovery training from our Flight Operations Group there. And obviously, as we saw before, it's in the kind of news at the moment with potentially with that ATR crash there. So still a live issue, still something that needs to be looked at by airlines and operators of, just giving pilots this this experience in unusual attitudes and how to get out of them. So we're going to have a look now at what's in the September 2024 issue. So who's going to lead off?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go on. What have you got for us?
We've got a good article on, it's effectively about Saudi, the Saudi Arabian carrier, but also looking at the bigger picture of aviation in Saudi Arabia, commercial aviation. So it's from Neil and Matthews, one of our regular correspondents. Saudi have got Vision 2030, which is part of their grand plan to effectively not wean themselves off oil, but to diversify what the nation is doing and their income comes from. So they have aspirations for being a big airline hub. But Saudi, a lot of investment in Saudi. They've just bought their first, placed their order for their first eVTOLs. They've gone with Lilium.
Yeah.
There's cargo airlines being launched. Really interesting part of the world. So that's a good read, and of course, very visual feature as well. Great pictures.
Yeah. And obviously Saudi is the flag carrier, but they've also got Riyadh Air as well, which is kind of, it's going to be interesting how they market the two there and how the two sort of compete. I mean, it has happened. It does happen. Well, it already occurs in terms of Etihad and Emirates. Both from the UEA, but slightly different. Different sort of states there within the UEA, within the Emirates.
And Saudi got low cost carrier as well. So looking at that, Neil makes a really good point. There's a huge amount of transport, airline transport coming in from India into Saudi. So you've got the Hajj, you've got things like that. So an area that they're really looking to concentrate on is that Indian subcontinent market. So a real growth area in aerospace.
Yeah.
Bella, what about you?
Yeah, this article from Teresa Poltarova is a great one. I think it's a good follow-on from my recent space rescue article, basically talking about the space tourism sector and how, for the most part, it has been very unregulated and how that really needs to change, especially with space tourism. We always talk about it's becoming very normal but very frequent, and she kind of talks about how it's time for the suborbital kind of space tourism industry to outgrow its Wild West years. And so she looks back kind of from the evolution of Spaceship One's launch 20 years ago now.
And I can't believe I was reporting on that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
No
I can't
way.
believe that.
I was barely alive.
all right.
I'm 25.
Was it Brian Binney? I think it was Brian Binney, wasn't it? It was the first into space. And we watched it live happening. I can't believe that's 20 years ago.
Yeah, such a long time ago. Which is funny because it's I think to most people it seems like a really new industry. And I guess 20 years is new in the grand scheme of things. But anyways, kind of looking at the evolution from then and how ultimately not much has actually changed when it comes to regulating the space tourism industry, mostly to do with the moratorium on the FAA's ability to kind of regulate these flights as they're mostly looking at how these flights affect people on the ground or, aircraft sharing the airspace, not necessarily the astronauts going into space.
But there were also concerns that over-regulation would stifle the market, wasn't there?
And
it's a tricky balance, isn't it?
Competition and things like that. So I do think it's a really good article just looking at this, but ultimately that we do need to have some more regulation as it's becoming, such a big industry, and how we can protect astronauts with, what we're seeing even just with Starliner. There's real reason for this. Yeah, well, I mean, at the moment it's sort of experimental adventure tourism, isn't it? Sort of like you are, sign on the dotted line. You sign up for it.
Sign an indemnity form and
which is probably more than you did if you were perhaps going on one of the rights early kind of
Probably more.
But what about you? So let me.
You go first.
I've got an article to talk about. So we've got something interesting there about Ireland and their air defences or lack thereof. So it's the Irish Air Corps. They have a minimal air force, as it were. But there are plans to maybe there's some sort of proposals there to maybe up their kind of air force, boost it a little bit, particularly in things like what you call air policing, air defence, kind of like those sort of ideas, and also maritime patrol. They've got this huge maritime area, and there are now Russian submarines that are going in and allegedly getting up close, maybe tampering with cables, that kind of stuff.
I think most of Europe's internet cables come through that part of the Irish Sea, don't they?
So
the West Atlantic. Rather.
So there's been a bit of a wake up there. I think for the Irish of Ireland on those sort of security issues. Do we need a bit of a bigger air force?
Well, there's been RAF Poseidons. I think the Norwegians were patrolling as well because Ireland doesn't have this maritime patrol capability. And I think it might have been the Telegraph, one of the newspapers recently dubbed Ireland the ultimate freeloader in terms of defence.
Yeah, so
an interesting article.
So interesting there on are they going to spend more on defence or not? Given the defence budget sort of increases around the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
So what they got at the moment is sort of half a dozen PC9s, which I think the PC9's due for replacement fairly soon, isn't it?
And was it C295s? But they're surface maritime surveillance rather than maritime, ASW maritime patrol. That's an interesting one. We've also got. I'll just go on again. We've also got our farmer report. So we've got the farm report on there. Obviously, if you haven't seen it yet, it's also online. We've also got our podcast roundup there. So go and check out the Daily News Insight blog. There's some good stuff in that. And then also a car cover story. Drone shows.
This is something that it's a fantastic feature. So it came in from a contributor. I've added some extra material to it. Initially started looking at using drones as a replacement for fireworks or an alternative to fireworks. So some concerns over the environmental impact of fireworks, the noise that scares animals, that kind of thing. Drones, we call it painting the sky with colour. You've got the capability now to create almost any shape in the sky, and it's three-dimensional. So with the D-Day 80th anniversary, they've got an enormous Spitfire with D-Day stripes flying through the night sky made out of drones. So I've spoken to a company called AEROSPACE, to Rob Barsby, did a really good interview with Rob, looking at how they've evolved their airshow world to include the drone scenario. So They fly Grob 109 motor gliders at night with fireworks on the wings. They're now integrating that with drone displays. So you've got fireworks, drones, and that's the picture we've got on the cover, is that the Grob 109 flying around a firework display and a three-dimensional drone display.
Crazy.
But the thing that really jumped out to me from this was something that AEROSPACE did quite recently out in Poland, where they flew a glider on aero tow behind a helicopter. This was at the Leszno show. Put the helicopter into the hover, so the glider then hung vertically, sort of nose high underneath the helicopter, with smoke winders on the wingtips, obviously, while a drone was flying around filming this and relaying the footage for the live feed and to the audience at the show on big screens. Then as the glider fell away, imagine like a dart dropping down nose first, the drones followed it down into its display. And Rob talks in the article about the safe zones, how there was no conflict, how everybody was working on. So rather than using line of sight, they were using first-person view drones, so they could actually see exactly where they were. And he discussed all the safety mitigation that went into that. So really, really interesting.
I mean, you know, having been to many an air show, and obviously, you know, air shows, there's nothing like them for the sound, the feel, the smells. But you do think in kind of transmitting that to people who aren't there on you know what's the next step? How do you really grab people's attention? I think that's you know, if you can get the, you know, obviously we see that GoPros, everybody's got GoPros now. You've got kind of GoPros of F-16s going vertical and that, but now these kind of tracking shots where you're like, how on earth did they get that you know F-18 comes past you and you're like, wow.
It's the as Rob says in the article, and he's a great exponent of this. It's the next generation of air display flying. The industry's been around now for 110 years. This is the way it's moving, and it's about making it more of a visual art. It's including more people, but also giving you those views, not just the people at home, but actually having it on the big screen. I know Red Bull did this for the air race. They were very early into this with the live broadcast of the aircraft to the screen. So again, you know, imagine, we're never going to grow tired of seeing a Spitfire fly by. But imagine a formation of Spitfires with the drone going around it, giving you the different views, cutting in with, I mean, our expert team here would be fantastic for this, editing and cutting, but cutting into cockpit shots actually in real time while it's flying. So, I think this is really exciting for the airshow world.
Brilliant. Okay. And also we've obviously got our usual afterburner in this month's issue. We've got articles there on Race to Space, which is a UK university rocketry competition. And that ties in with the president's theme there of design, build, fly. We've got an airline gender training roundtable and all the other usual stuff there going in there. So please do send us your branch news and events to features of us, send them to anybody really. But if you want,
we'll get it eventually.
We'll send us your pictures and your reports from any branch events. So upcoming events and shout outs, what have we got?
As we record this, I'm going out in the next week to TAG, which is the Tamworth Aviation Group. I grew up in Tamworth in Staffordshire. And every so often they foolishly invite me back to give an after-dinner speech at the Tamworth Aviation Group. So I'm going to go and do that this coming week. And I think that's all I'm doing for the foreseeable future. But looking at your list, Tim, I think we've got quite a lot of events here at Fort Hamilton Place and around the Aero Society bazaars, haven't we?
We certainly have. We'll have to put out more things for you to do then. So we as we record this, we got the RS Air Law Summer Reception on 4th of September. That sounds like it's going to be really, really interesting because it's going to be about autonomy in aviation as well. So advanced air mobility, drones, legal questions arising thereof. We've got an executive roundtable on engineer licensing. 12th of September. That's a really hot topic at the moment. Brexit, CAA, ARSA licenses. We've got the RAS Young Professionals Conference on 13th of September. So that's good for our young professionals and our next generation board. We've got the Amy Johnson Lecture, 19th of September with Nicola Rosie Stevenson. She's an ex-tornado navigator, human factors expert, I think, as well. 15th of September, I'm actually off to go and see the Stoke Spitfire project, who've got a simulator there.
The 15th of September, of course, being Battle of Britain Day.
Battle of Britain Day, and it's being opened by, it'll be sort of test flow now, I think, or opened by Nathan Gray, who's
cool.
Royal Navy test pilot.
Yeah.
We've also got RS HQ lecture, Western Secrets Projects, 26th of September. I think it's a HQ lecture. I'll have to check that. RS Corporate Partner Briefing, Roland Berger, 30th of September. Design Build Fly Conference, 15th and 16th of October. So set your diaries for that, because that's going to be...
That is going to be brilliant. I'm really looking forward. Having spent some time with our president, David Chin, at Aero Friedrichshafen earlier this year, I think I may have mentioned it a few times on the podcast. Seeing David's enthusiasm around this whole design, build, fly. Obviously, as you know, our presidents pick their theme, and I don't think I've seen a president so enthused as David is about this. It's just great to see.
Yeah.
And we've also happening in October. We've got the RS Flight Simulation Conference, 22nd to 23rd of October. That's flight simulation. That's professional flight simulation. That's not on your Xbox. And that's going to be an interesting one because they're looking at eVTOLs, they're looking at AI, they're looking at synthetic air traffic control systems, things like virtual reality, augmented reality. A lot of interesting stuff going on in flight training at the moment. So
I was also going to mention, this is not a event or anything, but I thought I'd mention this is my last podcast episode for the next year.
It is.
If only we'd known.
Yes.
No, yes. I think I mentioned a couple, maybe 2 podcasts
I think it was
ago.
when we were in the wind tunnels at Farnborough you broke the news.
Yes, I did break the news that I'm going to be going on maternity leave. So for the next year, you'll just have to stick with these 2.
Right. That sounds like a cue.
It does sound like a cue, doesn't it?
Sound like
well,
a cue.
we couldn't let you go without giving you something.
Yes.
Oh my gosh! I could cry.
So if you'd like to open those and show people what we
Do
have,
it now?
please do, yes.
Oh my gosh, that's so kind. Oh no,
So-
I'm like
so
shaking.
So this is the rustle of paper now.
Rustle of paper. For those of you listening, there are presents being unwrapped.
Yeah. What the heck? Oh my gosh. I love it. Oh my gosh. I was thinking for a second, it looks a bit small for me.
A NASA baby grow.
So that's
so for our resident space correspondent and NASA space.
That's the next generation of space professionals.
Yeah,
we're already working on that.
That is so cute. Oh my goodness. This is killing me. Trainee astronaut.
And a trainee astronaut baby grow.
Oh my goodness, thank you
So
so
are we
much.
Because I believe it's a little girl, is that right?
It is a little girl.
What's the name?
Hazel.
Hazel.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Thank you guys.
All right.
Such a nice surprise.
Well, we wanted to give you something to say we're going to miss you while you're away.
Oh, I know, I'm going to miss you guys so much. But
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Yeah, she will be back. Okay. Obviously, you'll be giving feedback on all the podcasts from
We might get you to dial in one day.
Writing in.
Sure.
So we're just about to round up. what have we been watching, reading, playing?
Like first?
Yeah, go on.
I've got another prop.
You've got something to show and tell.
Look at this. What a weighty tome this is. This is the Vintage Aviation Echo. Now, about 15 years ago, somebody asked me on Facebook to name the next generation of aerospace journalists.
Yeah.
And I picked 3. I picked Paul Fidian, I picked Jamie Ewan, and I picked Elliot Marsh.
Not me.
I said next generation.
Oh!
I'm proud to say Jamie Ewan now wants to keep publishing aviation news. Fly Past. Paul Fidian writes for Pilot magazine, and Elliot Marsh and Hugh Hopkins and the guys have just created this Vintage Aviation Echo. 268 pages.
That's quality.
Of just the most beautifully produced vintage aviation content. Contributors including Charlie Brown, John Romaine, Richard Grace, Nick Gray, the luminaries of the airshow world and vintage aviation world, but not just warbirds. This has got vintage aircraft in as well. So Spartan executives and the DH-88
really cool.
Comet. So that's just been Vintage Aviation Echo, and I'm incredibly proud of Elliot and the guys for what they've done with that. That, in my experience, is one of the most beautiful bits of designed magazine work I've seen in years and years and years.
You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of the good old days of the World Air Power Journal.
In Wings.
Wings.
Yeah, absolutely.
That kind of quality. So how much is it and how often is it coming out?
It's twice a year, £18, and you could get it from vaemag.com.
Brilliant, okay.
You're right, £18 sounds a lot of money, but you're getting 268 pages.
It is.
Quality.
Real ethical. As a publisher, I used to work say it's got thump factor.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, nice.
Just like Aerospace magazine.
Indeed.
Bella, have you been watching and reading anything?
Well,
First Man, you watched. First,
oh yes,
your first
I
man.
watched
You watched First Man.
First
Yeah. What do you think of
Man.
that?
I thought it was great. I mean, I feel like you have different opinions about it. We were talking about it earlier. I thought it was good. I think because we spoke about how we're not sure how, not accurate, but we're not sure necessarily how. Yeah, I guess accurate it is of Neil Armstrong's life and kind of prior to, joining the Apollo program. But, in an entertainment sense, it was a really good movie. And honestly, it was good for me because I feel like I actually didn't know a lot about his background and kind of how he started. But yeah, that was a really good movie. I watched that on the plane recently.
I've not seen that yet. I did meet Neil once, and he was just one of the loveliest.
I met Neil.
He was just one of the loveliest people. So yeah, it's interesting. Does he cover his test flying career before he was an astronaut?
No,
A little bit. The intro is excellent.
Slightly,
Yeah.
but it's mostly to do with his space career.
Okay.
But no, I thought it was a really good movie. I'd be interested to look at and see if anyone has commented on whether it's an accurate depiction. But it's not that new of a movie anyway, so I'm sure there is something. But yeah, anyways, that was really good, and I'm still yet to watch The Blue Angels.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either yet, but
we'll get there.
Yeah, it's on the list
at some point.
So.
Yeah.
What about you, Tim?
So talking of old movies, so there was a staff outing last month.
I was crippled at home from my farm injury, so I couldn't join you.
Top Gun 1986. It was on a retro season at the Pitch House Central, and so it was an absolute treat to see that on the big screen again.
Yeah.
F-14s,
Did Goose get out this time?
He didn't know, but I didn't realise how having not seen it on for a while on the big screen, I didn't realise how sweaty people were in the 1980s.
Oh my god!
Just literally everyone was covered in sweat, indoors and outdoors. It was just like they just sprayed people with oil and not just volleyball, but it was just. But you can't beat it. It's got it's cheesy, but the flight's still can't.
It's the best.
I'll be there. And it's got F-14s in it. There's no such thing as a bad picture of an F-14 from any angle.
No, that is true.
So yeah, love that anyway.
I wasn't able to go, but last weekend it was the Little Granston Children in Need Air show, and they had that radio-controlled F-14 Tomcat.
Oh, the giant one.
Yeah, absolutely enormous.
Cool.
It's like 15 foot long. I've seen some video of that. What a machine that is.
Yeah, that's. Anyway, right. So that comes to the end of our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like the new setup. Any feedback, please do get in touch. Also to remind you, we are on Spotify, we're on SoundCloud, we're on iTunes as well. And where can we find us? So I am on. I'm still on X, RAS Tim R. Steve, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm RAES Steve B, and I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook as Stephen with a PH, Stephen Bridgewater.
And you're obviously still on there for the moment, but yeah.
I'm on X, RAES Bella R. Yeah.
And obviously aerosociety.com is where you find the insight, and we're on YouTube as well. So see you next week, see you next month, and and I hope you enjoyed it.
And good luck, Bella. We'll see you in a few months' time.
Yes.
Definitely. Bye guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.